Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This and peace out to the rest of you. The blackest hearted, blackest minded, blackest man on social media signing black in, shining again, asking you to hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Let me start off by thanking BGS because I posted the chart. I didn't put a link up to the entire article, which I should have done. So I need to go back and edit that. And I'm not going to do it from a phone. I'm going to do that when I can get to my laptop. But I said in there that the article associated with the chart specifies that a lot of this is due to delays in buying one's own home, living with the parents, and going for higher education, and therefore putting off marriage as well. I said that I don't think that that's all of it or even half. Now that I think about it, that might be about half of it, but not all. I'm sure that that's not all still. Now, the reason that I'm sure that it's not all is unimportant. It's important, but it's not as important as why I'm doing the recording now. BGS clarified for us an academic point that we need. And that academic point is how you look at articles, charts and articles. You take everything in its in the context. You factor in everything that's written about it, but then you also factor in other studies. I was thinking of other studies when I posted this. I assumed that these things were on everybody else's mind too. Now, we've heard Jordan Peterson say that most women actually find very few men attractive. We've heard him say that. We've heard Obsidian refer to the dating website's studies about how many men are unattractive to most women and how many approaches actually fail. I was thinking of this when I posted that and drew my conclusion. I assumed others were, and I was wrong for not specifying because of this in combination with what Jordan Peterson said and what Obsidian referred to and the studies to which he referred by certain dating sites. I conclude X, Y, and Z. That was lazy on my part. And I probably shouldn't use my phone when I want to go in depth, because I'm not going to type as much on my phone keyboard. Because if my screen jumps to another app or window all of a sudden, which happens, or I type something and that's not what goes into the actual print, I'm subject to smash my phone against the wall. I lose patience with it. It's probably best I just go to the keyboard. I smashed the phone once before and it was expensive and I still didn't feel bad about doing it. I wasn't capable of feeling bad. I was like, it should have obeyed me. Fortunately, I was still able to get it fixed under warranty despite the fact that I threw it against the wall at 800 miles an hour. So since then, in order to avoid destroying my own property, I have just tried to be more patient in typing, but then that means I type less on the phone, not on the laptop. That's on me. That's my fault. Because even what this means is that even when I'm thinking more responsibly, I can't necessarily convey that through the keyboard. The solution is not for me to develop more patience. I'm never going to have it because I'm never going to have more time. The solution is for me to use the laptop keyboard more often. But I'm glad that BGS not only read the article like I did, but that he read it with full concentration. I didn't because I kept getting interrupted. Now, it's part of why I didn't comment too much on the article. Yeah, I read it, but I knew I couldn't remember everything about it. I kept getting interrupted in the process of reading it. He read it with full concentration, and it sounds like without being constantly interrupted as he was reading it. And he brought what I missed to light, and I'm glad he did. Now, my reasons for my conclusion are based on this in conjunction with the other things that we've heard. But this is something that needs to be pointed out too, though. See, we got misconceptions, and I've said before, and he said before, it's good to know the general pattern, but avoid the misconceptions. The 80-20 rule is not necessarily 80 and 20. If we use that as a nickname, that's fine as long as we know that the stats don't actually prove it to be 80 and 20. 80% of the women wanting 20% of the men. But 80% of the women are just out there highly promiscuous. We don't know the stats on female promiscuity, at least I don't, and not all of us do. I am very sure that in the West, women are far more sexually active on average than men are. Now, whether they're doing this with the same few men, I don't know that those same few men would have that kind of time. What I do think is happening is that women, simply put, are able to, of course, they're able to be sluts more easily because no one's teaching men to say no. Matter of fact, a lot of men believe they can't. And consequently, this turns around this perception, and us accepting this perception makes sex even more unavailable to most men. And for me, the only sex I'm allowed to promote is marital sex. I'm not allowed to promote fornication, and I'm not going to. But still, telling women that you're not going to waste your non-sexual time and attention on them is a necessary weapon of war, and this is a war between the genders. It is a war that women are waging on men, so your necessary defense is to tell them this, even though I would tell you don't fornicate with them anyway. It's just you need to put it in their minds that what they don't get to do is go out here and screw someone else for free and then turn around and demand something from you in exchange for no sex at all. That does need to be in your head. You could be the most serious practicing Muslim in the world, not fornicating. You still need to have that in your mind. And even then, that means that you would not be trying to get the attention of women in general. You want to marry someone, you'll talk to her and her dad or uncle, granddad, brother, her and a male representative in the family. You would do that if that's the case. But you still have to work with men and women, different people. And you still need to have this in your mind that they don't get to come to you trying to get you to be the hero because you're religiously inclined when they're out here making bad decisions with their vaginas. That's what needs to be known. And I'm going to say this, if you are a practicing Muslim, or this is a side note, if you're a practicing Muslim and you are married, and a lady at your job comes and says, my boyfriend or my ex-boyfriend, he's a stalker and he wants to do this, that, and the other, can I stay with you and your wife tonight? I'm not trying to start nothing. I know your wife's at home, and that's why I'm asking you and her. It's still unfair to your wife if you go to your wife and ask her, can a lady co-worker stay in the house, in the spare room because somebody's stalking her? That's not fair to your wife. Because that means your wife is sitting up here. If she's also a practicing Muslim, she ain't making bad decisions with her vagina. So why should she have to share her home for any length of time with a woman that makes bad decisions with her vagina? And some would say, well, you don't always know when somebody's a stalker. Yeah, that's true. But the fact is, women claim to know certain things about men. I can just tell this, that, and the other girl, he looked like he probably, and then fill in the blank with something negative. This is how they talk in the West, especially sisters. That's how they talk. They usually use that against men who don't have anything grossly wrong with them. As a matter of fact, what I saw on the Gulf Coast growing up was that they would use this against men who were more educated and had a greater sense of responsibility. That's when they use it against a man. Now, you take a man with some muscles and tats, but he really ain't about much in life, they stop using that on these dudes. They didn't do that. He got tats, a record, some other baby mamas. Nope, They stopped saying that type stuff. Because their VPS is backwards. Now, this is where I do agree with the men of my age group and younger. Your perception of the pattern is about as accurate as it can be without you actually having numbers in front of you all the time. But you must pay attention to what BGS said about something else. When you make your conclusions, you need to use different studies and data in order to draw it, as well as your personal observation. Because your personal observation is accurate in that particular context, assuming you're not looking through a biased lens anyway. It's accurate in that context. What I saw growing up in the 80s and 90s on the Gulf Coast. Gulf Coast ain't the entire United States. I understand that. What I saw later on was based on Atlanta up until I left the United States, minus a little 14-month stint. Minus about a 19-month stint, actually, in which I had a good job for most of the time, and I had an okay job for the rest of it, living back in my hometown on the Gulf Coast. Half a year after I left my hometown to go back to Atlanta, I left the country entirely and never went back to live and don't want to. So I have to understand the limits to what I saw. And you must understand the same thing. But when you're going to tell other people about a particular pattern, you must be honest about where you got the information from and what that information actually corroborates. And that's why I slipped up. Matter of fact, I don't even want to say slipped up. That was really bad on my part. Terrible judgment. It's due to an innocent cause, me being interrupted and distracted easily. So it's not a harmful intention on my part, but nonetheless, that was wrong. That's irresponsible of me. I'm a professor. I should know better. I taught history in the States for a while. On any normal given day, when I have time to think about what I'm doing, I would know better. My conclusion is that other things may or may not be half of the problem. By the way, I still conclude that there is this pattern in the West of associating higher education in men with less masculinity. Now, my reason for that is because I actually sat and watched this pattern develop, both in the Gulf Coast and then later on in Atlanta. And I watched the associations and assumptions that were made even on television programs and movies that were released nationwide. So I experienced what I am concluding. But to tell it to you, I'll be more careful about the context in which, when I present something, whenever I present anything, go ahead and assume from here on out that I'm presenting it along with the context of what I have presented before or what we have all heard someone mention before and none of us disputed, i.e. Obsidian's reference to the studies done by dating websites and Jordan Peterson referring to these studies. We've seen and heard this before. Now, if I present something and it goes against that, I'll try to point that out. And in the meantime, I'll also be more careful about what conclusions I'm telling you to draw from something versus what conclusions I'm standing on because of what I observed and then what I read from these particular studies. I'll be more careful on my part. And thank you, BGS, for reminding me. And I mean that from the bottom of my black heart and the depth of my black mind. Last thing that I'm going to say about all of this together is this, that I have stated before that what we men must do is we must fight back two ways. One is that we got to stop making the peen too easy. We think we can't do it because we're men. We've heard all that stuff before. Conventional wisdom is men can't, turn it down. We got to take what we can get, but we control marriage. Well, in actuality, what happens is that your control over marriage is still shared with women, and their control over sex to a certain extent is shared with you. But they have full control over it if you don't insist on sharing it with them. In other words, they don't have to rape you. They can offer it to you, and you just have to take it. If that's your mindset, you've given them full control. You've relinquished your half of the control that you already have. And see, they don't relinquish the control over marriage that they share with us. They don't relinquish that. That's not the way they do it. They reserve the right to say no. That's why they want marriage, and then they won't ask you for it. That's only begun recently. And even then, we're more aware of it because of videotape. I mean, I put it like this. Our awareness of this happening is more recent. I don't know how often it happened, but we know that historically speaking, a minority of marriages are based on the women asking. That's a minority of cases. We know that. I mean, there's always been tales before there were videos of men proposing. In certain parts of the world, they never heard of women asking for marriage, but it's something that they want. Think about that. When we stop and actually think about how little sense it makes, that's the beginning of us fighting back. And this is a war. This is not a war we wanted. It's a war they're choosing because their objective is to take your resources, and you're the guy they don't want. Most of you listening to this, I am the guy that most of them don't want. And if they do, they won't admit it. And I've been select and non-select in different environments. But even men who are select, they will try to turn into non-select at times. What do you think their crap tests are? They're trying to find ways to even disqualify the men that they do select, sometimes, on occasion. Now, that being said, what I'm getting at here is that you fight back two ways, and one of them, as I've said, is by chastity. You restrict access to the peen. I'm not going to promote fornication. I'm not allowed to. Only sex I can promote is marital sex. I promote recreational sex, but within marriages. Sorry, Mrs. Philosophier, but I'm going to promote recreational sex within a marriage because I do believe that there should be times when men and women engage in sex because it's sex and not for transactional reasons and not even to have kids. I do believe that they should do this, men and women alike. But when you restrict access, gentlemen, of course, every man ain't going to do it, but then every woman has not done that in these societies either. Even in conservative societies, every woman's not waited till marriage. So you're talking about the outliers. But when you control, when you restrict access to your peen, you then are in a position to assert even greater control over marriage. You understand now? The other way that you must fight back, gentlemen, is that even when you are not mentoring these kids who ain't got no dads or whose dads ain't mentoring them themselves, you understand, those kids with those dads. Even if you're not mentoring them, you got every right to tell those young men exactly what the hell not only their mothers don't want them to know, but their aunts and grandmothers and older sisters don't want them to know about the games that women play. Because their sisters are being taught exactly those games to play while they are young. These little girls are walking into the first day of middle school knowing all these things that happened to their cousin, their older sister, their mama, their auntie, their grandma, and how they dealt with it. And then, these young boys are walking into their first day of high school, don't know what happened to their uncle, don't know what their dad went through, don't know what the older brothers are going through, don't know what the older cousins are going through and went through previously, don't know none of this stuff. They just beginning to learn it. Behind the curve. And what's the reason? Because when they were young, you know how it is. Little boy ran in the house to get some water, all the women in the house, they hush. Okay, here's your water. Hurry up and drink, and now go back outside and play now. Assuming it's not a school day, right? What does little sister get to do? She gets to stay in that house, play with her dolls on the floor while the hens are squawking about what to do about men. Flip that. Because you see, they're telling each other and passing it down how to manipulate. And what is it that they want now? What is their motive for manipulation in the first place? They want most of us, who they don't want sexually, to use our resources and time to help them raise the children, or rather help them provide for the children of the men that they sexually did want. But they don't want us to actually put any input into the rearing of the child. Nigga, just give up that money. Or maybe go ahead and put some time in with the kid, but just supervise him for me. And if you're dumb enough to do that and not charge for it, then they get on Quora and ask, can I get this babysitter or this friend of mine or this neighbor to pay child support because I can convince the court he's accepted a fatherly role. This is war, gentlemen. And it's not one you chose. So to fight back in this war, we've already done certain other things like check out the society and things like that, but we got to get to these brothers while they're young, before they even get to middle school. And just because you ain't the biological father, or even if you are and you ain't paid child support, just because of anything that any woman might ever bring up to say that you don't have a right to do this, or some of their goons and mamdingos, Super Sly 75, would say that you don't have a right to do or say to these, you have every, not only right, you got an obligation if you find the ability. Now, how you do it is up to you. You get to think about what how you going to pull it off, what you going to tell them, and when you're going to tell it to them. You got every right to strategize, because you may only see a particular kid once. You may know that once you tell this boy this stuff, it's your last time his mother's gonna ever let him even see you. You may know that. So what do you can either plant the seed or you can give them the full course depending on your ability. But we must do this. Absolutely. Of course, some of these goons and mamdingos, along with the gynocrats and matriarchs, are going to come along and say, you don't have a right to do that. Y'all can fuck the shuck up, because we have not only right but obligation, because you don't have a furthermucking thing to say when not only grandmom and aunt and big sister are sitting up and telling these little girls what games to play or what games they have played. And I'm not talking against them advising these young girls on how to be safe. That's not it. But you don't have a furthermucking thing to say when mom sits up and tells them these games, and dad tells them how to be safe with men, and tells them if you don't know a guy well, and until anything else, you assume he's going to try something. You have nothing to say about that, about the over preparation of these little girls. So you don't have a furthermucking thing to say about us trying to merely adequately prepare little boys for the games that these girls are going to play on them, and keep on playing as long as they can, up into whatever age they can no longer do it. You can fuck the shuck up. You ain't got a furthermucking thing to say about it, nigga. Call it brainwashing if you want to. Good. We should have done it a long time ago. We don't know apologies for telling people the truth about what someone else wants to do to them and they didn't do anything to deserve or provoke it. Because the way things are going right now with the community, you got a whole class that simply because they got breasts and vaginas, they get to take all the credit for any good anybody coming out the hood does, and then they turn around and shirk all blame for anything bad anyone in the hood does. So when their little boy grows up and is robbing someone and sticking somebody up, another black person, they get to eschew all blame. Hell, they don't even want the kid to be blamed. Let him win a draft in the NBA or the NFL. My baby, I did that all by myself. 'Cause we the backbone of the community. So you can fuck the shuck up. Because if anybody's been brainwashed, it's you goons that sit up there and allow them to take all the credit and none of the blame. No matter what. Whose mom was that said that she made him fight when he was 10? Was that Deontay Wilder's mom that said that? Or was it another boxer? I can't remember. She gets to sit up there and say, I made him fight when he was young. And we're looking at her like, oh, she turned out a champion. I know he lost the round, but every boxer wins and loses. We sit up and get to say, see, she turned out this warrior, this shining black warrior. Okay, well, first off, he actually had a dad. And he didn't get none of the credit. Why? He wasn't making his boy fight all the time at age 10. You see where this is going? So I want to be careful about what I use to justify particular conclusions, and about differentiating between the conclusions that I stand on based on what I could observe and based on what I can read. I'll be careful about that in the future. By the same token, What I've said about how we got to fight back, that still stands. That's not a conclusion I'm changing because, again, this is something we can all see. That's just my solution to the problem that we can all look at and observe and then read statistics on. And again, thank you, BGS, for helping to keep me straight. And thank you on behalf of others in this space for the historical knowledge that you've been able to bring to us. Thank you all for listening. Black heart, black mind, blackout. Assalamu alaikum. Black heterosexual non-select male power just because they don't like it. And black patriarchy until extinction of judgment day.